Hello, Old Timer here again, section 1 of the book, A Handbook for Humanity. This video is part 5 in a series of videos entitled The Last Barefoot Generation, which is my biography and about a country kid growing up in the Deep South, beginning in the very early part of the Great Depression, 1929, 1941, and on through the Korean War. When I ended part 4, I was talking about how I learned the Morse code used by railroad telegraphers by passing many hours visiting my dad's uncle. His name was we called him Uncle Milty. He was a station master and telegrapher at the railroad depot in a community very near to where I lived. Over the years I learned the code, and I also learned all about how trains were controlled by the telegraph system. And because I could understand all the messages Uncle Milty was sending and receiving, plus any other messages sent by any other agent all over the system. That's important because when I made 2 failing grades and 1 C in my first quarter in college, which ended in December, just before Christmas, I explained how my mom told my dad she wanted to buy some new clothes for me that would be better suited to wear during the upcoming spring quarter of college. My dad informed my mother to just help me pack because I wasn't going to waste any more money. He wasn't going to waste any more money on a fare, and she could take the car and drop me off in the community I was just talking about, where the where the railroad depot was located. Right there, the railroad runs parallel to the U.S. highway. That's just separated by about 100 yards. The little community has a few houses and a small Standard Oil gas station and a very small kind of general store. Okay, back to why I was so lucky. My dad asked my mom to drop me off there near the station where Uncle Milty's railroad depot was. I was still processing the fact that I had just been kicked out with my few clothes and about $12. Naturally, I went right into the depot, and there was Uncle Milty sweeping up the place. Later, one night after as I was lying in my bunk right after I joined the Navy, I realized that the whole thing was a setup, because when I walked in, Uncle Milty didn't even look surprised to see me with a bag full of clothes. I'm almost sure, I know for a fact, that it was a setup between my parents and Uncle Milty. Even though I was being kicked out, they already had plans for me. I actually think between my dad and Uncle Milty, he started training me way back before I even thought about learning to be a telegraph operator. My dad always said that I probably needed some other kind of vocation going along with farming, because he didn't know how long that was all going to last. Anyway, when I walked in, Uncle Milty, he was sweeping. He just looked up and started talking about there was a passenger train that was due, and it was going to deliver some freight items, and that Miss Brock was sitting in the waiting room because she was expecting 50 live baby chickens in a box she had an order from Sears and Roebuck. He finally got around to asking me where I was going, and I had to tell him that I was thinking about where I was going. Then he asked if maybe I needed a job. He said, I see, finally he mentioned the clothes. He said, I see now you have some clothes there in your bag. That looks to me like you might need a job. I hadn't even thought about a job. But at that moment, I was head over heels and feeling sorry for myself. And he told me, though, that if I wanted him to, he would contact the train company headquarters and talk to the chief dispatcher to see if I could apply for a telegraph operator's job. And I asked him, well, when can you do that? And he said, well, I can do it right now. And he said, if you want to. And he asked me, you gonna work at it if I get you a job? I said, yes, sir. It doesn't look like I have much choice. I really do need a job, even though I hadn't even thought about it. But anyway, so he walked into the telegraph office and sent a message requesting to speak to the chief dispatcher, and pretty soon a gentleman by the name of Mr. Irvin came on and asked him what he needed, and Uncle Mildy told him about me, and Mr. Irvin asked Uncle Mildy to put me on the line with him. So he did, and I got there to the telegraph key, and Mr. Irvin, by railroad code, he asked me how old I was, and I told him I was 18, and I told him that on the railroad telegraph, and he told me that he could read my fist very well, and asked me when I was thinking about going to work, and I told him, well, any time would be good with me. He said, well, why don't you get on the train when the passenger train when it comes through this evening? And I said, well, yes, sir, I'd be glad to do that. He said, well, I'll contact the conductor on the train and ask him to stop there and pick you up. And he said, when you get into town here, just go into the station master there where you get off, and I'll leave instructions with him on what you do for the night. But I want you to be in my office by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, and I'm going to send you the address right now. And so he did. Anyway, I went on the train that night, and they had a room on a extra car sitting there, and I slept in the rail car that night on a nice bed and first class, on a first class rail car. Anyway, I went to the office the next morning, and Mr. Irvin, he hired me, and he assigned me to go to work on an extra gang. Extra gang, they was a group of men who lived in railroad cars especially designed for them. The extra gang did everything. They did the real maintenance on the tracks of the railroad line. On their little few cars they had hooked together, they had a bathroom and shower car and a dining and food preparation car where the cook and the helpers all worked, and they had a car where all the crew had bunks and a locker for personal things. I went right to work then. I had to go on the carts every morning to wherever they were working on the track. Then I'd have to get off and go down the ditch to the telephone pole and carry my line up there and hook it to the telegraph wires, and so I could be connected. And then they had a little table I'd take down there and a chair, and I could sit down there by the pole and copy the messages, whatever that was sent, if it was coming to me. Anyway, I quickly learned two things about being a telegraph operator on a railroad extra gang. Every man on that crew let me know that they were depending their life on me to copy every message correctly that was meant for them, because they had to know to the minute if a standard schedule had been changed, and if any train was coming any time that was unscheduled, so they'd know to clear everything off the tracks and so forth in time. It was a very important job for a kid like me. Every morning they reminded me that they needed to know to the minute any extra train that might be coming through, north or south. Anyway, during my short time on the extra gang, I want to tell you, I also met some of the biggest, strongest, best human beings that I have known over my lifetime. I also ate some of the best meals in the work train dining car that I've ever had. On the Thursday that I'd been working as a railroad extra gang telegraph operator for 1 month, my crew train was moved much closer to where my parents lived, and I didn't live there anymore, but I decided to go home that Friday evening. It was a good thing that I did, because as a notice had been sent to me from the local draft board to report to a certain location on a date about 2 weeks from the date that I got there that evening. The next Tuesday, I met with my friend Tommy that I played football in high school with and so forth, and he and I decided that we'd go to the city and join rather than wait and be drafted into the Army. And anyway, I joined the Navy, and Tommy, he went in the Marine Corps. He and we went, and we were going up the steps together, and I asked him 2 or 3 times if he wouldn't go and just join the Navy with me, and he said no, he wanted to go in the Marines because he wanted to get that tough training, because he wanted to be a boxer one day. Anyway, after I got out of the Navy, actually it's when I was changing from the Navy to a different situation, I came home and I found out that Tommy had been sent to Korea, and he got killed when he was in a Marine detachment guarding a battery of long guns. Anyway, he was the Chinese overrun where he was one morning, and they killed everybody, including Tommy. Sometimes I wonder if I hadn't talked him into, well, when I mentioned to him that I was going to join the Navy, maybe he hadn't even thought about it, and maybe the whole situation had been different, and he wouldn't have lost his life like he did there. What I'm trying to say is maybe the date and time he actually did join might have been different. He probably would have had to go because he wasn't going to college either, and maybe fate might not have put him there on that freezing hill in Korea that morning. Anyway, when my dad tried to help me get a college education, I wasn't serious about pursuing any field of study in college at that stage of my life, even though I still today feel that I failed my dad and mom, as well as my high school counselor, who sent my school record into the university and stepped forward and went on record that I would be a worthwhile student. However, if I had continued as a railroad telegraph operator for 10 or 12 years more from when I started, I would have been out of a job right in the middle of my working years, because the railroad changed to a computer control system where they didn't need telegraph operators anymore. The old Navy that I was in included all the physical training and tough discipline that had seen the American sailors through the Second World War. I thank the Navy for that boot camp experience, because I think I grew up then, and it has served me well in many years in my government work. However, what I learned about my local draft board and its members a few years later, when I came home from one time from a government assignment, it made me lose faith in humanity and see it as it really is. I'll tell you, when Tommy went in and got killed, the local banker in the town at the other end of the county, who was a member of the draft board, had 2 sons, one my age and one 2 years older than me. Neither one of them got drafted. one of them went to work in his father's bank right after he graduated from high school, and the other went to college. The owner of the local Buick Chevrolet dealership, who was also a member of the draft board, had a son 1 year older than me. That son went to work as a salesman in his father's car dealership and was never drafted or go to college either. When I came home from the Navy, he had to total 2 new cars and had received some scrapes and bruises, but nothing that even kept him in a hospital overnight. But he never got drafted. Everyone, even the girl with him when he wrecked that second car, said that he was drunk. And another thing, the local minister who was on the draft board had a son my age who never was drafted or didn't go to college either. Everyone said that they deferred him because he didn't believe in war. Meanwhile, they drafted at least 8 black kids that I knew, and everyone said that an exception had been made on how the Army used black young men now. They drafted every white kid that I knew whose parents were in that small circle of business owners or weren't above the average wealthy, except my friend James Hammer, because he walked with a limp. A few of those kids, actually 2, I think it was just 2, one got wounded real bad, 2 who were drafted ended up losing their life in that terrible, useless war that is known today as the Korean conflict. A conflict where 35,000 young, mostly poor Americans lost their lives without even knowing what it was all about. I know that statement is true because I was the same age as most of them, and I know how little I understood about it. On the 3rd morning after arriving in the Navy boot camp in San Diego, California, my company of 86 young kids were given a kind of aptitude test, and I scored the highest second grade on the test. The result was posted on our barracks bulletin board. It was just posted and never mentioned by our commanding officer, who was a 16-year Navy Chief Petty Officer. But upon class graduation from boot camp, things started getting strange for me. Every other kid got orders either assigning him to a ship or some naval shore station or to some special Navy school such as fireman school, a yeoman school, or ordnance handling school, or sonar technician, or ordinary seaman, and so forth. But me, I just got orders to go on a 30-day leave just like everybody else did and report back to the commanding officer of the Naval Training Station, San Diego, California, rather than being ordered to report somewhere else after my leave time. I have to end for now. More about my time in the Navy and how there was a radical direction made for me, including the rest of my economic life. Thanks for listening.